To start off, we just want to welcome you, Colonels Kelly and Donna Igleheart. We thank you so much for being here with us today. Just tell us a little bit about yourselves and what brings you to where you are right now.
Well, Kelly and Donna Igleheart, we're delighted to be on the show today. Thank you for the invitation. We were commissioned 29 years ago. We've been officers for several years now, 10 years at Corps appointments in the Southern Territory, followed by a succession of headquarters appointments. Most recently, we just returned from the Southern Africa Territory, where Don and I served there for 5 years. And my role as Chief Secretary and Donna's role as Territory Secretary for Women's Ministries. And then in July of 2020, we arrived in the Western Territory, where we've taken up similar roles here, and we just love being near home.
A lot closer than you were when you were in South Africa.
A lot closer, yes.
Well, one of the questions that I'd like to ask you is, what emotions did you have when you first learned that you would be serving in the Salvation Army so far away from home?
Well, the first, I guess that initial emotion is surprise and excitement, and many things start to go through your mind. For us, it was, I think the Lord had been preparing our hearts, even though we had never, as you'd say, raised our hands to say, yes, we want to do this. But I believe the Lord had, through the years of serving as territorial youth leaders, setting up mission trips, visiting different mission teams throughout the world, the Lord was planting those seeds then. And so initially there was a lot of excitement, and then you begin to really process what this means for leaving family, and really I call it friends, family, and familiar. And but we are just so thrilled at how the Lord just worked out all of those mixed emotions, really. And we're just, we look back on that day, that initial day when we were really asked, is there any reason why you couldn't serve overseas? And immediately we looked at each other and said, there is no reason that we could not.
So you served in many other places, and each time you left one community and entered a new community, and you had to leave behind what you had started somewhere and then enter a new place. And with each place, there's some things that you had to learn. But specifically, with your service overseas, what are some ways that you found you could enter that new appointment, that new location, that new community with grace and peace?
It's a very good question. And you know, in many ways, anytime a Salvation Army officer moves from one appointment to another, you change culture. It may be from one state to another, or even from one type of appointment to another. And so changing cultures as an officer is a skill that you'll need over and over again. But of course, changing to a different country does require a little bit a different tact, a different approach to that. And for us, I think really it was about learning to listen, practicing Ephesians chapter 4, being humble and willing to learn and listen, to love people, and just be a part of a group that already pre-exists. It's easy for a Westerner or even someone particularly from the U.S. to, you know, we're kind of hardwired to go in and fix problems and be solution-minded.
I think as well, we did what we could on our part, early onboarding, even before arriving in South Africa, because we did have a few months waiting on our visas, to read what we could, to watch movies about the apartheid, about Nelson Mandela, to read stories about missionaries who had served in Africa, and to try the best way that we could. We knew that it wouldn't be like it, you know, actually being there, but we did our homework. We tried to educate ourselves as much as we could, and really a lot of time spent on our knees, a lot of time, you know, asking the Lord to prepare and soften our hearts and to give us already a deep love for people and a country that would soon become family. And I would say to you that we really mourned leaving before arriving, because we just knew that the Lord had a beautiful journey waiting for us.
When you accepted your call to serve as missionaries, there might have been some fears and some uncertainties. What kind of risks do you think people have to consider if they feel that they're called to the mission field, and how would they prepare themselves for that?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and the word risk really is a wide there's a wide definition, I suppose, of that. The risk of not going would be a terrible thing to have to realize. The privilege that Donna and I had to go and serve was beautiful. But when we think of risk, maybe we think of personal safety as one example. And I don't know too many communities here in the U.S. that where there are desperate people who are living, who make decisions that desperate people must make. And some of those areas certainly aren't safe. And to be truthful, much of Johannesburg and South Africa, there are people who are economically living in depression, whose opportunities aren't there, perhaps like they are here in the U.S., where the unemployment rate for young people will exceed 70%. And so when you have those kind of conditions, people have to make difficult decisions to feed their family, to do things that perhaps others wouldn't have to consider. And so we lived and worked in those type of communities. And by the grace of God, we were kept safe for almost 5 years, the whole time that we were there. But I will say that many people that we served alongside of did end up sometimes being attacked, having things taken from them, cell phones and cars and things that could be replaced. At other times, there were people who were held at gunpoint and threatened. And so there are certain risks that one must consider, but those risks and the reward, well, certainly the reward goes well beyond the risk. And so the risk for me would have been not going. And the reward, well, we saw it firsthand. And we trust that whatever we were able to accomplish there will add value to the kingdom of God. Not sure if you have anything to say. Yeah.
Yes, Carol, I remember being at a youth event right before we left, and that question was asked of me on a stage, and 400 or 500 youth workers in front of me, and I just really leaned into the Lord. I knew at that point whatever my answer would be somewhat significant to the listeners. And so the Lord I felt like He was just giving me these words that my calling, my covenant outweighs the fear of the unknown. And that is the truth. And that became more of a reality. My calling, my covenant, knowing that God is sovereign in all areas of our life. It wasn't always easy. It's a paradox. There were the best of days, and there were some very hard days. And but looking back on it now, you just wouldn't. I can't imagine our journey in life, and our marriage, and our family, without the Southern Africa Territory. The people. It's always for us. It has to be about the people. And we that whole theme of no regrets. We wanted to embrace the culture. We wanted to embrace our surroundings, but more than anything, we wanted to embrace the people, the Salvation Army, and to learn from that. And we are changed. We are no longer the same Kelly and Donna who left in 2015. Now we will always have a part of the Southern Territory and the Southern Africa Territory, and now the USA Western Territory will be a part of us.
You mentioned that, Donna, that not every day is easy, that there are hard times. And there probably were some things that went wrong, maybe things that you learned the hard way. You have any examples, either of you, that you'd like to share about things that you learned maybe by making a mistake or by learning things the hard way?
I have an early example was just meeting with leaders, just being in the country about 3 weeks and being so excited about a new family and new friends. And my expectation of how they would embrace me and I would embrace them. I had this really high expectation how this day was going to go, first time meeting. And I had set a place, left a chair open for someone to come and sit with me. And I was so excited about asking this mama to share a meal with me. And so I had sat down and I was waiting for her to come. And then I asked her to sit with me and she backed away. And she said, "No, Mama, I cannot." And I realized then this is not going to be as easy as I thought it would be. And so I could have easily been discouraged. Perhaps I was at that moment. But I sensed once again, you have to be, as much as you can, so in tune with the Lord and just listening, even when those disappointments come, just really kind of grabbing hold of that moment, capturing those negative thoughts and just listening, okay, what can I do now? And I really sensed that the Lord said, serve them. Serve them. And I thought that to be a bit strange. I knew in that culture, leadership didn't do as much serving in that way, practical serving. We were served. And that was something, a practice that we really had to just come to grips with. We always were to go first in the line. They are so incredibly, they honor leadership there. And it's really a beautiful thing. But I spent the next 2 days serving. I served tea, I served biscuits, and I'm sure maybe at that moment, people were like, this is very strange that she's serving us. But a few days later, I received an email from this same mama, and she said, she apologized.
Who, by the way, was a lieutenant colonel.
Yes. And she said, I was just scared. You're white, you're an American, and you're in leadership. And she said, I didn't really think I could contribute to a conversation. But then she said, but I watched you for the next few days, and I watched how you served us. And she said, I knew then that this couple, that this woman really wanted to get to know us. And she said, I can promise you I will always sit with you when the opportunity comes. But I learned a great lesson, and I'm glad it was early on, that I had to do more leaning in than I thought. We were the new people. Maybe my expectation was that they would lean into me a bit more. But I'm glad that happened in the first few weeks, because it spoke into the rest of our time there, which I believe was so beneficial for us. When we lean in and we serve and we love, and they know that they're seen and that they're heard, then they just pour that same feeling and same actions towards you. And so I'm very grateful for, even though it was very surprising and perhaps disappointing at the moment, the Lord taught me a great lesson. And just being open and so in tune with the Lord when He says, go this way or go that way or say this or not say this, then it really turned out to be a great lesson for me personally that would speak into my entire time there.
If you could speak to someone right now who is preparing to leave their culture where they feel safe and go into a place that might be more dangerous or that they might anticipate being more dangerous, what would you say to them? What words would you speak into them and over them right now?
Well, I would just first say the first 2 letters of the word gospel is go, and 2/3 of the word God is go. And so we are going and sending people. The risk well, there's risk anywhere that you are. But the risk of not going and the risk of being regretful, of wondering what if, would be a terrible thing, I think, to live with. Certainly, the Lord never called us to safety. You think of the life of Christ and the life of those early disciples. They were called and they were faithful and they went into places that were not safe. But I think for me, it's in those valleys of the shadow. It's in those places that I sense God even closer than the places of safety. And the Lord will also protect you. His holy angels, I have no doubt, were busy with us the whole time that we were away. But I would just suggest and urge anyone who's considering or feels that the Lord may be calling you into service outside of your culture or even outside of your country, that you go, that you never second guess. And I believe that you'll always sense in your heart that it was the right decision.
I'd like to thank you, Colonels Kelly and Donna Igleheart, for joining us today. We appreciate your perspective and the rich experience that you have shared with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Bless you.